Efforts are well underway to count every Nebraskan as part of the 2020 census. The results will help determine how billions of dollars in federal funding flow into states and communities each year. We talked to a U.S. Census Bureau official and a local data expert about the 2020 census. That's tonight on Speaking of Nebraska. Thanks for joining us on Speaking of Nebraska. I'm NET News Director Dennis Kellogg. It's time again for the U.S. government to count every person living in the United States. The Constitution requires this count every 10 years, and it's a monumental task with a lot at stake. Becca Costello of NET News looked into efforts to count every Nebraskan.
States across the country are taking the 2020 census very seriously. California is spending the most at $187 million. Neighboring Colorado allocated $6 million, and Missouri about $500,000. That's all on top of the $6.4 billion the U.S. Census Bureau is spending. About half of states didn't budget any money, including Nebraska, but we're one of only 3 states without a statewide committee to coordinate outreach efforts, and that concerns officials like Senator Tony Vargas of Omaha.
I worry that it sends a message from our state that this is not as important as it really is.
The U.S. Census Bureau encouraged every state to create a Complete Count Committee, or CCC. But when the unicameral passed a law last year to create one for Nebraska, Governor Pete Ricketts vetoed it.
The census is all done at the local level, and having a state count committee that was going to talk about things like census parades was going to be a waste of resources and really take away from what we have to do, which is focus on getting people into communities to be able to do it.
The bill Ricketts vetoed wouldn't have spent anything from the state budget. Instead, the committee would have raised private funds. Critics say the return on investment would be worth it anyway.
They're really hard to count populations, which include those that are elderly, kids under the age of 5, and traditionally, historically lower income communities, which also tend to be where people of color live. And so my concern is that undercounting these populations across our state will lead to an inaccurate representation of both our needs as a state and the populations that are really going to benefit from these types of programs.
With a lot on the line, a few organizations got together to pick up the task of coordinating census outreach efforts across the state. Heather Engdahl of Civic Nebraska is leading that effort.
Organizations were worried, frankly, because that does pose an extreme challenge, in addition to the challenges that we knew were on the table to begin with. But I will say that at this point in time, I'm extremely confident in all of it. We've secured very generous funding from organizations and foundations here in the state that are also dedicated to these missions.
And for his part, Governor Ricketts isn't concerned about getting a complete count for Nebraska.
Well, Nebraskans are used to doing things differently. We're the only state in the country with a unicameral, and that seems to serve us right. So I think that we can, again, really count on Nebraskans to be engaged at the local level to be able to get a complete count for the census, because frankly, again, that's where it really needs to happen.
For Speaking of Nebraska, I'm Becca Costello.
Joining us now are Blanca Ramirez Salazar, Partnership Coordinator with the U.S. Census Bureau, and David Drews, a Research Coordinator with the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Thank you both for talking with us today. The impacts of the census, of course, are far-reaching, and so we want to start off by hearing from Dennis Johnson, who is the Denver Region Deputy Director with the U.S. Census Bureau.
First of all, for representation. Certainly the members of Congress, the number of members in Congress are determined by the population of each state, but within the state, the local districts are also determined based on population. And we have an equal representation policy in our nation, and we want to make sure that each of us have the same voice in running our government. So the census numbers are used to make sure that that determination is accurate. But almost as importantly, there are billions of federal dollars that come back to each state based on the census numbers, and that's each year. So making sure that Nebraska gets its fair share of that pool of money is very critical, and it impacts not just this year, but for the next 10 years. So it becomes critically important to be accurate.
So let's break that down a little bit, beginning with you, Blanca. Sure. What does the census mean for the average Nebraskan? Why should they care?
So for the average Nebraskan, what it means is that we will have about $675 billion annually available to be distributed over 10 years. So that's annually between 2010 and 2020, 2030. And what that means is that money needs to be distributed. It could be for senior centers, it could be for parks, it could be new businesses that are deciding also where they need to open up and set up shop, for the schools, lunch programs, after-school programs, and for infrastructure like roads. So it is vital that every person participate because they matter.
David, why do you think the census is important for us?
Well, our office does research and we focus on a variety of different statistics. So we need to see how Nebraska is doing from a variety of measures, whether that's overall population growth or setting up certain policies and programs that help the population that lives here. We are becoming more diverse. We have an aging population. So the census is the primary source for those type of statistics. Home ownership, for another example, is asked on the census. So we can take and see how we're doing, how we compare to other states, and that comes back to the everyday Nebraskan as policies and programs are developed to make the great life that we have here even better.
So we're about a month from the official start of the census, and where are we as far as applicants and as far as workers who can help carry out the census? Are we where we need to be?
Okay, so in terms of where we are for recruitment and applicants, we have about 17,000 total that we were trying to recruit for the census jobs. And that is an estimated 2,700 that we are expecting and estimating to hire. So we definitely need everyone to apply right now who's even considered serving as a Census Bureau official. We are really in our last push right now. There are a number of counties that are struggling. We are struggling in terms of the applicants, and I could mention just a few of those. So clearly Douglas County, which is the largest populated county. We have Dodge County, we have Wayne County, and then the corridor between Kearney and Lexington, and then there are other spots as well. So we're definitely encouraging all Nebraskans to consider applying for the Census Bureau's final operation, which is a non-response follow-up. This is a last push right now, and we really need everyone's support and just get into that pool of applicants for consideration. We're having mass hires occur March 3rd through March 17th, and additional hires will occur after that.
Now, there are typically some populations that are undercounted. I mean, you can think about children under 5, college students, ethnic minorities, Native Americans. What's being done to make sure that those populations are being reached? David?
Well, we have started a variety of outreach efforts. So at UNO, where I'm at, we are having competitions where students can record messages on how important the census is and that it's easy and simple, fast to complete. So we'll have a little competition for that. We're also partnering with other institutions of the university system to have a coordinated effort to work on the census count so that all the students in dorms are accurately tabulated, plus also the off-campus messages for those students who might be the first time on their own where they're filling out their own census. 10 years ago, they probably were living with their parents and their parents filled out the census for them. So the messaging is really important, and we're getting that out through social media and other varied approaches. So I think we're in good shape. Young children are another special group, and Census has a lot of resources in various languages so that people know that everybody counts, from the youngest to the oldest. All persons here in the state and the rest of the U.S. count in the U.S. Census.
And it should be pointed out that if these groups aren't counted, it's going to cost actual money, actual federal money, correct?
Yeah, as some of the segments have said, there are federal dollars that come back to the state, especially for roads, health programs, education, and when we don't have people counted, then our fair share isn't brought back to the state, and that impacts the programs that are being worked upon by all the various agencies.
Blanca, one of the ways you're trying to reach out to some of these groups and to really everybody is something called complete count committees. Tell us a little bit about what those are about.
Yes, Dennis, thank you for asking about that. So we started earlier this census, And we started in 2017 back at the state capitol, having a kickoff at the state capitol for 2020 census. And then we ramped up in terms of our partnership program. Compared to 2010, where we had 3 partnership specialists, we now have 18 partnership specialists who've been out in the local communities across the state of Nebraska to ensure that we have a variety of partners who are going to serve as trusted voices and help us inform their constituents that it's important to be counted. So we have in Nebraska 26 complete count committees. And what these complete count committees are, they're a stakeholder group that is a cross-section of a community. They are identified and secured by the highest elected officials when we're talking about state or federal, meaning the sovereign nations, as well as counties and cities. We also have some community complete count committees, like the Nebraska Counts, who covers the entire state, the nonprofit sector, as well as the Hispanic Latino Complete Count Committee and Early Childhood Complete Count Committee. So that's a portion of what we're doing, and that is how we were able to generate with 2,500 partners throughout the state of Nebraska. So they're out there in those communities serving as the trusted voices, speaking to media, they're talking to businesses, they're talking with the child care centers, they're talking with the schools in terms of supporting every aspect of the census and into its different phases.
Census Bureau is also targeting several areas of the state with bilingual census invitations in Spanish and in English, including parts of Omaha, Lincoln, Grand Island, and Fremont. What are some of the other resources available for Nebraskans who don't speak English?
Sure. So one of the programs that in partnership we are going to be launching is called the Questionnaire Assistance Site Program. So what that is our partners are stepping up to the plate and they're saying, we believe this is so important that we are going to provide volunteers to help individuals in our community. In addition to that, we have our partnership specialist team and what we are calling census response representatives who are working in operations. They're going to tag team and they're going to be going out to these communities to set up a table to assist individuals to complete their questionnaire. We also have the questionnaire assistance line that's available. So that's something that I'd like to mention. It's something that's new this time around is we have, yes, the information in Spanish and English is hard copy form, but online we have that as an option to complete the questionnaire in 13 different languages. We also have the questionnaire assistance telephone line where we will have live staff who will be able to assist individuals to complete their questionnaire in 13 languages.
Is there any concern about, you mentioned telephone there, is there any concern about broadband internet and the ability in rural areas of the state where that may not be as strong as in urban areas to reach that population? David?
Yeah, and Census is addressing that through their methods. So they have their own survey-based products that tell us by county, what portion of households have a computer and what portion of those have either high-speed internet or another form of internet or maybe no service at all, depending on what people subscribe to. So Census changes their mailing method based upon how that works. So in most urban areas where that internet might be a little bit better for connectivity, they'll be prompted to go online and fill out the census in their first couple of mailings. But in more rural areas or places perhaps like North Omaha, South Omaha, where internet might not be as good, they will immediately receive a hard paper form, still with a web address where they can go fill it out online if they have access, but they're given paper right away as well so that people can do it. It's quick and easy, takes about 10 minutes, only have to do it every 10 years. So it's really not too much of a burden on any particular household.
Talking with David Drews, the research coordinator at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and also Blanca Ramirez Salazar, the partnership coordinator with the U.S. Census Bureau. Blanca, I want to ask you about the Latino populations. Grassroots organizations have told us that some Latino Nebraskans have a little bit of a fear about responding to the census because they don't want immigration and customs enforcement to use that information to target their communities for raids. Heather Ingdahl of Civic Nebraska says that these communities need more assurance that their data will not be shared with other agencies. Take a look.
It's a very valid fear. It's not just, a worry or a challenge. It's genuine fear of being deported, of being detained, and all of the things that come along with all of that, with dealing with ICE and all of those other agencies that have to do with this issue. And so, yes, we do kind of try to educate on the privacy, confidentiality, and those rules in place for Census Bureau employees. But ultimately, for me personally, it's been most impactful to sit down, comb through all of that, voice all of the worries, and it's really reiterating in different words all of those things about the laws. But it's deeper than that, because you need to understand that it's not that simple to say a couple quick sentences and expect it to be enough.
So Blanca, what is the Census Bureau doing to make sure that this information remains confidential?
Well, first of all, everything has been tested. We have gone through a number of tests. The census just doesn't happen overnight. It begins even 10 years prior. So there's a lot of testing. In addition to that, we also have to abide by the Title 13. And what that means is that we are required as Census Bureau employees to maintain all information confidential forever. We are all sworn in Census Bureau officials, so any data that we receive, we maintain confidential, with the exception of when we are pushing it out at the aggregate level, so that the communities can use it for planning purposes and to be able to draw down those dollars. So we definitely take everyone's safety into consideration, and we are very serious about making sure that we maintain it confidential. One of the things I'd also like to mention is whenever we get to the point of knocking on the doors, which is our final major operation called non-response follow-up, there are things that the public can do to make sure that individuals are actually Census Bureau employees. They will have technologies, whether it's an iPad or a telephone with a Census Bureau logo on it. They also will have a name badge, and they also will have some type of a bag that will have Census Bureau information. If an individual, the public, does not still feel comfortable, they can go online and check to make sure that that individual is in the Census Bureau system as an employee. So we take this very seriously, and we understand that there is fear out there. We want to make sure that our trusted voices are getting the message out to their constituents that it is important to be counted. Every person matters.
David Drews, last time we did the census, I think the self-response rate was around 77%. That first push, that means 77% returned their census forms. What would it mean to the state of Nebraska if we could up that number to, say, 87% by 10%?
Yeah, well, that'd be awesome, because that number drives a couple of things. One is the accuracy of the actual census results. So we know that when people fill it out on their own, taking their time, thinking about the responses and how it all fits together for their own household, that's just much more correct, more accurate than if you're being asked, on the spot by somebody at your door. Maybe there's something on the stove and you're trying to rush through it, so the accuracy isn't as good if you have to get the data from door to door knocking. The other piece is that the response rate, or having to go back door to door, is what drives the Census Bureau's costs. So we all support that as taxpayers, and if we, in Nebraska, raise our response percentage, and across the country it would tend to go up. Maybe it'll be easier this time with the internet response option for folks to do it right on their smartphone or a tablet. That would significantly lower the costs, because all these employees that Census has to hire, and then they pay their mileage to go around the communities. There's just a lot of costs with going door to door, and it's such a monumental effort. So raising the response has always been the census goal for the complete count committees and other partners as they try to make the best census possible.
And Blanca, the Census Bureau is taking center stage right now, but this isn't just a once every 10-year kind of thing. You guys are constantly putting out surveys and asking for information, right?
Absolutely. We are definitely out in the field every year with ongoing surveys like the American Community Survey, and then there's another survey and other surveys that are taking place in various communities. So we definitely want everyone to cooperate with the Census Bureau to ensure that we have accurate data, and your community has accurate data to make the best decisions in terms of funding and for programs that are being and services made available to the community. So yes, the Census Bureau, the decennial census, is every 10 years, but we are hard at work every year with ongoing surveys.
And Go ahead, you want to jump in?
Just add that a lot of times people fill out their census form and they'll get another survey in the mail. It's a different product. They're like, I already completed my census. Well, all are important, so that survey-based data, we use it all the time, and it covers topics that are beyond those just in the decennial census. So it'll include education levels and workforce and income levels and things like that, where we see and understand poverty trends. So I was just working with a group this morning that was interested in brain drain and how we do tend to lose some folks that have some higher education, higher skills. That's only available from those survey-based products. So they're very important, and not just the decennial census, but if you get something else in your household as well, to fill it out so you don't have to have one of those door knockers come to complete that information.
So we just have about a minute left. So just quickly, I want to ask you both again to emphasize the impact that the census has specifically on Nebraska. What are the things we're going to pull for it? Blanca?
Sure. Well, again, it is critical because it impacts everyone's life. It impacts your family, it impacts your business community, it impacts government services provided for roads, for infrastructure, for health care, all kinds of services. So that's how it's going to impact the individual family. It's going to impact the neighborhoods. So we need everyone to participate.
David?
And I'd add, that the census is done primarily for congressional apportionment. So Nebraska, starting the decade, was very concerned we might lose one of our 3 current Congress seats. Looks like we'll be safe and be able to keep all 3, but their district boundaries will change. The 3rd district, more rural Nebraska, is likely to become a larger territory given some population loss there, and Omaha district will become smaller. So unicameral will be impacted as well.
Things are going to get real busy. David Drews, Research Coordinator at University of Nebraska at Omaha, and Blanca Ramirez Salazar, the Partnership Coordinator with the U.S. Census Bureau. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you so
it.
much.
You bet. This interview and tonight's program are available on our website. Just go to netnebraska.org/Speaking of Nebraska and join the conversation on social media. Find us on Facebook and Twitter at NET News Nebraska. Fred Knapp covers the Nebraska legislature every day for NET News. He joins us now to talk about a couple of issues that came up this week. Gun legislation and actual guns taking center stage this week.
Absolutely. The Judiciary Committee held a hearing on several gun control proposals, and hundreds of gun rights supporters showed up to oppose them. One of them would have prevented people with domestic violence convictions or protection orders against them from getting guns, requiring dealers to be present at gun shows for background checks and pass out suicide prevention information. There's also a red flag law which would enable law enforcement to take away guns from people deemed a threat to themselves or others. Gun rights supporters are opposed to all of these measures. And the effort got a lot of media attention because several, 2 or 3 of the hundreds of people that attended actually brought guns into the Capitol. Brett Hendricks of Omaha showed up with what he said was a loaded AR-15. As I mentioned, there were only a handful of people openly carrying weapons. Concealed carry laws in the state prevent people from carrying concealed guns in the Capitol, but open carry is legal. And there's been a lot of conversation since that about them. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh talked about intimidation, and Senator Tom Brewer responded to that.
It was clearly the intent to intimidate this body. I won't assume to speak for others in this legislature, but for myself, I was intimidated. I was scared. I was worried about how someone might react to my bill, and what I had to say might trigger a dangerous reaction. I was worried about getting home to my children.
And I openly said I didn't think there was a need for anyone to bring a gun into this building. But it is their right to do that. Now, if you want to write rules and prohibit that, have at it. But understand that that 400 can turn into 800 pretty quick, because this is an issue people will stand their ground on.
So are we going to see lawmakers make an attempt to try to ban open carry in the state capitol?
There's a lot of discussion about that that's continued throughout the week, and there are apparently a number of different ways that that could happen. One would be that a committee chairman could simply say, no guns in my committee. The legislature's internal governing executive board could make it a legislative-wide policy. the Capitol Commission, which runs the building, could adopt a rule or regulation, or finally, lawmakers could pass a law, although that would require some extra effort because the time for introducing bills has already passed, and they would have to suspend the rules to do that, and it would be very controversial.
Let's talk about another topic now. There's been some movement among states and even at the national level to allow college athletes to be compensated when their name or their likeness is used. Nebraska's also looking at that with a bill. Where does that bill stand?
The bill has advanced through the first round of debate, and it's modeled after a California statute. California was the first state to pass such a law in defiance of the National Collegiate Athletic Association. And so it doesn't encourage, it doesn't allow schools to themselves pay the athletes, but it would allow them to profit if they wanted to endorse a business, either on television, social media, that sort of thing. We had words in support of this from Senator Megan Hunt, the sponsor of the bill, and a little pushback from Senator Mike Groney.
This bill, please understand, does not require colleges or universities to pay athletes. LB 962 allows players to sign endorsement deals with brands and participate in the free market. For example, posting a sponsored Instagram post, or monetizing a YouTube channel, or accepting payments for appearing at training camps and events.
Coach Frost won't be sitting on a couch across from a kid anymore. It will be the advertising director. He will sit there and tell the parents, I can get your kid $150,000. Then the Alabama one will come in and say, I can get him $200,000. It'll be a bidding war. That's what it will be. It will have nothing to do about our facilities or our fan base. It'll be about the money.
As I mentioned, the bill advanced first round and the vote was pretty lopsided. It was 36-4. But colleges would have until July 1st, 2023 to comply, and a lot can happen in the meantime. The NCAA has a working group that's re-examining their rule, and even Congress might act.
Probably see more on this at both the state and the national level coming up. Fred Knapp,
Absolutely.
thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Fred joins us and keeps us informed in what's happening in the legislature every single day. You can listen for his updates on NET Radio at 5:45 and 7:45 weekday mornings and 5:45 in the evening. And read his stories each day on our website at netnebraska.org/news. Also on our website, you'll find in-depth signature stories from the entire NET News team. Recent stories included a writing program that helps military veterans put their thoughts into words on a page, a Lincoln man who built an intricate model of a fireboat to honor his father, and stories of how Nebraskans impacted by flooding are putting financial assistance to use. Those stories and more online at netnebraska.org/news. That's all for this week on Speaking of Nebraska. Thanks to Blanca E. Ramirez Salazar and David Drews for joining us, and to Fred Knapp and Becca Costello for their reporting, and to all those behind the scenes who work to bring this show to you. We'll be back on March 19th with a special one-hour episode focused on the ongoing recovery from devastating flooding this time last year. You'll hear the latest updates from NET News reporters and hear from communities like Peru, Dannebrog, and Winslow. Nebraska Flooding 1 year later airs March 19th at 7 p.m. Central on NET and March 20th at 6:30 Central on NET Radio. Until then, I'm NET News Director Dennis Kellogg. Thanks for watching.